Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. This is Getting Started with Drupal workshop at DrupalCon Europe 2021. My name is Mauricio Dinarte. I go by Dinarcono on the internet. My pronouns are he and him. And I collaborate with Agaric and Understand Drupal. The slide deck is already available, so you can follow along. And I have pasted the link in the chat as well. That is my email address and my Drupal.org profile if you want to contact me after the training. I will be more than happy to help. I am from Nicaragua, beautiful country known as the land of lakes and volcanoes, and we mean it. We have lots of volcanoes and lots of lakes and many active volcanoes. So if you ever want to visit a beautiful tropical country, you're more than welcome to come here. As I said before, I collaborated with Agaric. We are a Boston-based Drupal cooperative, but we are spread out throughout the world. I myself will work in Nicaragua, but we have people in many different cities in the United States and also in Europe. I am also very passionate about teaching, and I started this documentation project called understanddrupal.com, in which I write content in English, Spanish, and French to be able to help those like me who are not native English speakers, and so they can start learning Drupal without language being a barrier. So I also invite you to check it out. One of the topics that I am very passionate about is Drupal migrations, Drupal upgrades. So at the moment, we know that Drupal 8 is reaching end of life in a couple of months. Drupal 7 is reaching end of life next year. And there is a big push into moving to Drupal 9, for example. So I have written articles, books, and courses on this topic. And also I invite you to check them out. One thing that I want to point out is that this workshop usually is presented in the context of a full day event. And today we have roughly like 2 hours. It's actually less than 2 hours. So I'm going to be skipping a lot of the content that is normally presented, but I also want to share resources to material that already exists on the web. For example, this is a presentation that I have given in which I cover a lot of the concepts and backgrounds of the things that we're going to be doing today. So the workshop itself is going to focus a lot on doing a hands-on demo. So I will be walking through the process of creating a Drupal site and giving examples and all of that. So if later on you want to go back and revisit some of the fundamentals, some of the concepts, you can watch this recording of the video that is currently on the screen, or DrupalCon itself is recording these presentations. You can come back and see how I am using those concepts to build the fully functional website. So just a heads up, because it will not be possible to cover everything that is not already covered during this presentation. That being said, I am working on an extended version of this workshop that is going to be uploaded to the website understanddrupal.com. So, again, later this year, you can go to the website and you can find an extended version of the workshop there. So without further ado, and because I really want to focus on the practical part of that training, I'm going to switch directly to that. And from there, we're going to move on. So at any point in time, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I would ask you to prepare your question with letter Q, standing for questions, because in the chat, it is really hard to keep up with everything that might be there. And to make things easier for me, just by looking at the queue, I know that that is a question that I should address. The presentation that I said is under 2 hours, so I'm going to be making pauses every now and then, both for questions and also because it's 2 hours of content roughly. Just like to take a break to let the knowledge that we have covered so far sink in. As it was described in the description of the workshop, the goal is to implement a fully functional website, relatively simple, but it's still fully functional. And for that, one of the prerequisites was having a Drupal installation. So I have one site installed already. So I didn't want to, during the training, go over the installation process. But it is relatively simple, and depending on what you are using to power your Drupal site, at the moment I am using a tool called ddep. It's literally one command that you need to execute, and you're going to have a Drupal site installed. So we're going to assume that you have a Drupal site already available, and from there we're going to move on. So without further ado, I'm going to log in as an administrator on the website, and by doing so, I will be able to start adding content and interacting with the sites in many different ways. And uh, one thing that I like to do is present the result, like guide you through the process of how to do something, and then come back to it and do an explanation, and highlight things that are useful, interesting, or that you need to be mindful when working with Drupal. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing today. Okay, so as I said before, I'm going to log in into the website with my super secure admin account. And this is what I get presented. The difference with the previous screen is, for the most part, the bar at the bottom, at the top of the screen, which will allow me to navigate the website and the various interfaces. So by default, this is pretty much a plain Drupal installation with just a title and a slogan set. But when you have a plain installation, at the time of this presentation, Bartik is still the default front-end theme. We're going to talk about themes and how those changes the visual appearance of the website later on during the workshop. But as of this recording, this is still the default. So we're going to start from what you will get if you were to install Drupal today. And when you're using Bartik, you can click either on the home button, on the Drupal icon, or on the title of the page, and you're going to be taken to the home page. So Drupal is many things depending on who you ask. For example, Drupal is a CMS or content management system. Drupal is also a framework. Drupal is also a community. Drupal is, a tool. And there are many definitions, but throughout the course of this workshop, we're going to focus on the CMS part of Drupal, in the content management system. So what we're going to do is add content of different types to the website and try to, accommodate and manage that content so that it is presented in a logical and meaningful way. To that extent, the very first exercise that we're going to do is adding content to the site itself. So in a plain Drupal installation with Bartik installed, you are going to have in the front page, when you are logged in as an administrator, a link to add content. So I'm going to click that link, and you're going to be presented with two options by default, either article or basic page. The options that you are presented here depend on how Drupal was initially installed. By default, Drupal is installed using what is called the standard installation profile, and the standard installation profile comes with article and basic pages. If you install another version of Drupal, it might come with a different set of content types. And we're going to be explaining those technical concepts as we work through them. But for now, just like take a step back and think about content. Drupal is about managing content, and I am being prompted to either create an article or a basic page. Uh, in this example, I'm going to create an article. And just to give a little bit of context of what we're going to be doing, let's say that I want to create an organizational website, like for the company that I work for example. I want to have a homepage. I want to have a blog in which I write articles that can be promoted later. Let's say that I want to have a section in which I list the staff that work in the organization and, for example, store their email address, store their phone number, and so on. So that is kind of the example that we're going to be working on today, and we're going to be creating content towards that goal. So let's say that I'm going to be creating some articles, some technical articles that are going to be, promoted online. So I am prompted to enter a title. This is the title of an article that I wrote some time ago, writing your first Drupal migration. Then the body. The body is the actual content of the article. In order to save some time from typing, I have prepared some lorem ipsum text. This is just like placeholder text that you can find online by looking for these couple of words, lorem ipsum, and it is going to generate random text for you. As you see here, I have what is called a WYSIWYG editor with buttons so that I can select text and I can make things bold, for example, or italics. I can introduce HTML links and so on, many other things. But for now, we're going to just like do a quick run through the form that we are presented, and then we're going to come back and start playing around with different elements of the interface. So far I have a title, I have my body, which is the content itself, and then I have the opportunity to enter tags. So tags is a way to categorize content. For example, this content is about Drupal, and I can type a comma. If I can enter as many tags as I want. This article is also about migrations, for example. Uh, and that's it. I'm going to be adding two tags to this piece of content. As I said before, we're going to actually do a lot of things first in terms of creating content, and then we're going to come back and explain in more detail what each of these pieces is doing. In addition to adding the tags, I am also going to add an image. And again, for the sake of brevity, I will just be using some random placeholder images, in this case of, color rectangles. When you upload an image, for accessibility reasons, it is required out of the box to enter what is called an alternative text. And one of the many purposes or reasons why you specify this is because not every internet user you know uses the visit not every visitor to your website uh, will use the site in the same way. Some people, for example, might be using screen readers because they might have a visual disability, either permanent or temporal. And when they are using this software that is reading the website for them, when they come to an image, the software itself might not be able to understand what the image is about and give a description about it. So to accommodate for that, you provide an alternative text that is supposed to be a description of the image itself. In this case, this is a red box, so I'm going to write red box. But if I were, for example, using an image of some turtles or some birds that might be flying, trying to symbolize that this is a migration, like an animal migration. I could use some more descriptive text. But again, like when you add an image, by default, Drupal is going to require an alternative text for cases where people are using screen readers to visit your website. With that being said, I'm going to leave the publish options set right there, and I'm going to click save here. And this that we did, we just created a piece of content on the website, and talking in Drupal terms, this is called a node. Before diving too deep into what a node is or what a node is not, um, I'm going to create more content on the website. And again, we're going to be coming back to this in a moment. So remember that the first time that we created a node, what did we do? We went to the homepage and we had a link. That link no longer exists because it is only available if you had no content on the front page. So what are other options to creating articles, basic pages, and so on. I'm going to show you three more options. Again, the process is going to be relatively similar in what we're going to be doing. The second option to create content is on the left sidebar. You have this tools section, and then you can say add content, and you click there. And here you are prompt again, do you want to create an article on a basic page? For these first four examples, I will be creating articles. And then we're going to be talking about basic pages, the difference between them, and so on. But for now, yet another article. Uh, I'm going to reuse the title of something that I have written in the past again. And I will be also copying some text that I have prepared already. Again, this is just random text that is supposed to be a placeholder. Now, tags. We're going to revisit tags again. And you might remember that in the previous example, I entered the tags Drupal and migration. So what happens, if I start typing some of them? This article is also about Drupal. This article is also about migration. So it makes sense to reuse those tags here. So if I start typing dr, you can see that now Drupal is giving me an autocomplete, and I can select from this list. And the reason for this is because we want to avoid having duplicate tags for one, or tags where they might be misspelled, maybe just by one letter. So the system is kind of giving me a list of what is already there in case I want to reuse. Now you can notice that um, it has a space and in parentheses a number one. That is something that Drupal adds for any tag that already exists on the system. And that number represents what is called the taxonomy term ID. That is something a little bit technical that it is not worth diving into right now. But if there are questions about it, I can explain more later. But for now, just know that if you see that number in this interface, it means that it is something that already exists in the system and not a new tag altogether. So if I want to create another tag, remember that it was migrations. So I, I add that and select it from the dropdown, and I have a second option there. But this is also about files, and this is also about images. So I can keep adding tags as much as I want. Something interesting is that tags can have spaces, for example. So this is just an example, but I can say hello space world. And both of these words are going to become one single tag. In this case, it doesn't make sense to tag this piece of content as hello world. So I'm going to remove it. But again, I'm just pointing out some of the possibilities. And I am going to add a new image, in this case a blue box, and I'm going to save. So I have a second note of type article. Something that I want you to note, and again, we're going to start talking about how Drupal behaves out of the box, is notice how in this presentation, I am visualizing the full content of the node. I see the title, I see who created the node, in this case, the admin users, when that was created. I can see the blue box like kind of peak. I see two paragraph of content, and I see the taxonomies here. When I go to the home page, I have a similar but different presentation. In this case, I have a list of the articles that have been created so far, and um, the image is smaller for one. Instead of having two paragraphs, I only have one. So this is something that we're going to again be revisiting later, but just to keep in mind that for Drupal, it is possible to store the content and present it in different ways. So once the content editor has created different pieces of articles, content types, and so on, excuse me, have created basic pages, articles, and possibly other content types that we're going to be doing some of that later. Um, they can be presented in different ways. So, so far we have seen, going to two different places to create notes, the link in the front page, the link on the sidebar. But those might or might not always be available. So let's have a look at two other ways in which you can create content. On the bar at the top, under Manage, there is a content button. You click there, and you have this blue pill with a plus sign that says Add Content. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click there, and I am yet again in the same interface as before. So you might know already what is the drill. I am going to select article here, and I'm going to reuse something that I have already created, migrating CSV files into Drupal, and I'm going to copy some text that I have prepared. In the case of tags, again, this is about Drupal. This is about migrations, and this time this is about CSV files. So notice that I have two words without a comma in between. So this is going to become a single tag. For the purpose of this example, I will not be adding images. So I'm just going to click Save. And I am going to add one more note before spending more time into explaining what notes are and their properties. So the more that you work with Drupal, the more familiar you become with the URL structure of the application. Drupal itself is a web application that allows you to manage and create websites via a web browser. So, as many other things on the web, there are URLs. So you can go to the domain of your website, in this case, getting started.ddev.site /node/add. So if you don't find the link somewhere, you can just enter this URL and you're going to land in this page. So your domain /node/add, and you are prompt again to enter, to select what do you want to create. In this case, I'm going to select an article. I'm going to reuse some content. And for the tags, yes, this is about Drupal, but this is about a workshop. Add Drupal con Europe 2021. And in this case, I will not be adding an image either. So I have already created 4 different pieces of content. All of them are nodes of type articles. Now, we're going to start repeating a couple of concepts uh, just to make sure that we understand what is going on. The fact that I just said that these are nodes of type articles, they come with some functionality out of the box. For example, our articles will appear on the home page in reverse chronological order. That means that by default, and this can be changed, of course, and we're going to see how to change it in a moment, but by default, all the articles, will be presented here with the most recent at the top. And I can scroll down and scroll down, and I can find the first article that was written. So let's see what we get out of the box when working with nodes. I'm going to click the writing your first Drupal migration, and I am going to click edit. So this is where we're going to start diving a little bit into what nodes are and some of the properties that are available. So to start, I'm going to back out for a moment, and I want to point your attention to the URL bar. So you can see that this says, my domain is /node/1. So that one represents what internally is called the node ID or node identifier. This is a number that starts with 1 and then increments by 1 every time that you create a new node. For example, node 1, node 2, node 3, and so on. So far, we have created 4 nodes, so you can expect 1, 2, 3, and 4 being available on the system. With that being said, um, there are 2 things about nodes IDs. For one, they cannot be reused. For example, if I were to delete this piece of content, I cannot assign node 1 again later to another piece of content. If something is deleted, that number itself is not reused, and Drupal just will keep incrementing that number, and it will keep track of which was the last number that was entered into the system and add 1 to it. So for one, the node IDs are not reused. Another thing is that imagine that you have a very popular website and you have a lot of nodes, a lot of content. Let's say that I have written one article that is super useful to you, super relevant to what you want to learn. And I tell you, go to understanddrupal.com/node/1534. By the time that you get home, you might forget the number already, because we humans, kind of remember phrases easier than a big random number. So in order to work around this, Drupal has implemented what is called URL aliases. So what is a URL alias? If I click edit here, there is on the right sidebar, there is a URL alias option. And in here, I can specify an alternative URL that can be used to access this node, to access this piece of content. So for example, I can say slash, that's a requirement. It has to start with a slash. And then I can say first migration. And if I save here, now the URL changes, and this is way easier to remember than just a random number. I can say go to your domain understanddrupal.com/first-migration, and that's easier to remember. A couple of things about URL aliases. For one, although not required, it is recommended that it is all lowercase, and if you have multiple words, you separate them by dashes. Another thing about URL aliases is that um, you can still use the internal identifier to access the node. For example, I know that this was node 1. I can still access this by going to the domain/node/1. This is, as the name suggests, just an alias, but under the hood, Drupal is converting that alias into the node ID and loading that piece of content. So both options are still available. Okay, so we have talked about already 2 properties of nodes. Nodes have node IDs and nodes have aliases. So let's talking about more properties that a node can have. Another one is the publication status. So you might remember that when editing the node, there is this publish button. What happens if I unselect this? I'm going to click save here. And apparently not much has changed, and that's true. Visually, the only thing that's different is that now the context of the node is presented with a pinkish background. So there is some light pink color going on in the background. Um, that color comes actually from the theme, in this case Bartik. And what happens is if the node is marked as unpublished, it puts that pink background to signify that this is unpublished, and out of the box unpublished content is only visible to administrators. What does this mean is that if I copy this URL and um, open a new page, 1 second. Why is it not loading? So this is another page. In this case, I am not logged into the website, so I cannot see this piece of content. And you can see from the URL that I am trying to access it via the alias. I can also try to access it via the node ID. And again, it will not be available because unpublished content is only there for administrator users out of the box. If I go, for example, to the home page, I can see all the other articles that I created, but that one in particular is not available because it is unpublished. This one, for example, is a different one, node 2 instead of node 1, so I can visualize it. So I'm going close out of this. I just wanted to point out that you can have unpublished content. For example, if you are writing a long article and you don't have all the information, all the facts, if someone else wants to review it before you publish it, you can still store the content on Drupal, just mark it as unpublished, and it will not become publicly available until you toggle that switch. So I'm going to click edit here, and I'm going to publish it again, and that pink background is going to disappear. And if I were to open a new page, in incognito mode or in a new browser, it will now be possible to visualize it. Okay, so that is yet another property of the nodes. They have a publication status. Now, before diving into other properties of nodes, I want to explain something that Drupal gives you that is very powerful, that comes out of the box. Let's say that I make some changes to this piece of content. For example, let's say that I remove, uh, you know, a lot of the paragraph, that I change the tags or remove them altogether. Let's say that in the title I put a exclamation point. Let's say that I remove the image and I click save. Now, this piece of content looks very, very different than what we had before. Let's say that this was unintentional, that this was a mistake. So out of the box, Drupal offers something that is called content revision. And this, what it means is keeping track of changes to the website, to the content of the website. This is enabled out of the box, and later on we are going to see where this can be turned on or off. But for now, let's just assume that this comes enabled out of the box because that is the case. And let's say that I want to go back to the previous version of the node, how it appeared before those changes, which were not right. So far we have been clicking view and edit. These two tabs, delete is self-explanatory if I want to delete this piece of content. But I also have another tab called revisions. The revision tabs is the one that is going to be keeping track of all the changes that are made to the site. And the way that Drupal keeps track of things is it stores the date, the time, and who did the change. At the moment, there is only one user on the website, which is the admin user. But if I had multiple users and multiple people have permissions to modify the same piece of content, you are going to see their username. By doing so, if that was a mistake, you just follow the procedure that we're going to do in a moment to restore the previous version. But if it was intentional that they changed something to be wrong, then you can take action. For example, you can block that user to prevent them from doing more changes on the website because they are misbehaving. You can block them, delete them from the system. There are multiple options that you can take, but that will depend on your policies. But for now, let's say that this was a mistake and that we just want to revert back to the previous version without taking any further actions against the user. So in this case, I can click, I have the different, every time that I save the node with some changes, it is going to keep track of what was changed. In this case, I can click revert to the previous one under the current revision. I am prompt if I want to perform the change, I say yes, or I'll revert. And the way that this works is that it is not that it deletes the current version of the node and just goes back to the previous one. The ways that this works is that it creates a copy of the one before. So every change on the website is still being kept track of, including the things that were not right. If you later on want to go back and audit what happened or what was changed, you still have the option. But as you can see, there is a comment here that says this is a copy of a previous revision. and now this is a current revision. So in Drupal, though the keeping track of changes is called revisioning, and that's why we see this terminology here. But all of that to say that now I can go to view, and I'm going to have the same content as before. My title without the exclamation mark, the image, the taxonomies, the full text, and if I click edit, all of that is also going to be there. So this is something that basically comes for free in Drupal. Now there is one more thing that I want to point out about notes, is the fact that they can be added to menus. Menus in Drupal is the way in which you navigate the website. For example, if I go to the front page, if I go to view, you see this home link here. This is the main navigation, and so far there is only one link. Let's say that I want to add this node to the menu. I'm going to click on the menu settings here and say provide a menu link. And this might be too long, so I'm going to say first migration. Important that you select the parent link to be main navigation. We're not going to talk about description and weight just yet. I'm just going to save. And by doing that, this node is now part of the main navigation. And I can click on home. I can go back to the node, and we have something there. Now, you might say, I want the home page link to be the first to appear. How do I move that around? That is where, if I click edit here, the weight comes into place. By default, menu items are ordered by weight, and by default, the weight is 0. So if you have the same weight, the elements are ordered alphabetically. 1 comes before H, so that's why it appears first there. But if I want to change that, I can set a higher weight, and higher weights have two different behaviors. If the listing is horizontal, like in this case, the higher the weight is, what it means is that it's going to go to the right, farther to the right. If it is a vertical list, the higher the weight, it is going to sink to the bottom. It's going to go lower and lower. So the idea is that heavy items sink to the bottom. But that's just an example of how you can add an individual node to the menu, to the navigation of the website. So far, that is not something that I want to do. I want to keep. So I'm just going to remove that element from the menu listing. So I'm going to uncheck that. I'm going to save again. And now that menu item is gone. And what we have done so far is just like exploring different attributes that nodes have. We have talked about node IDs, URL aliases, publication status, the menu options, the revisioning, how that happens and how it behaves out of the box. So this is something that you get for free by installing Drupal. And another thing that we got for free, remember, is that all articles by default are listed in reverse chronological order in the homepage. And this is something that we are about to change. So before changing that, I want to show you a couple of other things that you get for free. Remember those taxonomies that we were adding to notes? By default, Drupal creates special URLs on the websites in which all the content of that specific tag is listed. For example, if I click on the migration tags, I go to a special URL in which I can see anything that was tagged with migrations. If I click the Drupal tag, I see everything that was tagged with Drupal. If I click the DrupalCon Europe 2021, I can see everything that was tagged with DrupalCon Europe 2021 and so on. So again, this is something that you get out of the box for free just by adding tags to the website, to the nodes. Drupal is going to create these special pages in which you can visualize any content and every content under that tag. So with that being said, let's take a first pause to check if there are any questions. Okay, looking in the chat, it seems that there are no questions so far, so I'm going to continue. Let's say now that it is nice that we have this list of articles on the homepage, but I want something different. Let's say that I prefer to have one static page that says welcome, and this list of content, I want them under a new tab in the menu that says, for example, articles. So let's see how we can do that. Um, I am going to add content. We have seen many ways in which we can do this. In this case, I'm just going to click on the tools, add content link on the sidebar, and I'm going to add what is called a basic page. So before entering anything here, I want you to take a close look at this interface and try to identify the differences. You might notice that when you add a basic page, you don't have the opportunity to add tags, and you don't have the opportunity to add an image at the bottom. So, that's okay, I guess. That's how Drupal operates under the hood. Okay, let's start working with the site and see where these changes come into place. Um, for one, I'm going to say that this is going to be my homepage, and I just want to say welcome to people coming to my website. Um, Again, just copying some random text. This is what I want to show. For the sake of the example, I'm going to put some text in bold, some text in italics, and I'm going to save. Now, let's see how this page behaves differently from the articles that we were creating before. We already saw the first difference being no option to add tags, no option to add image at the bottom. What else is different? If I go to the website, to the homepage, I can scroll down and that piece of content is not going to be there. So this is another different. By default, basic pages do not appear in the front page. Now, we are kind of in a problematic situation now because I lost that page. How do I find that page? There are a couple of options. For one, you can try to remember the node ID and enter that node ID. Because this is a training, because this is a prepared example, I know that this is the fifth piece of content that I created, so that node ID should be 5. I can go to my domain /node/5, and I should expect to find that content, and yes, it is there. But this is not practical. Like, again, as I said before, trying to remember the IDs is not ideal. You could potentially add an alias that says welcome, and we're just going to do that. Add the URL alias, and I click here, save, and now my the URL is /welcome. So it is true that there are some differences between articles and basic pages. Under the hood, these are called content types in Drupal, and but there are also many similarities. For example, the UID, the URL aliases, the publication status, the option to create menu items from an individual piece of content, all of this is possible. Um, let's say that I want to create a menu item that says welcome, and I click save here, and I have that there. So this is kind of what I wanted. I wanted this welcome page to be in the menu, but I didn't want it to be as a new tab. I actually wanted this welcome page to be my home. So if I were to click home, I would see this welcome page. So how can I achieve that? For this, we're going to go to a new section of Drupal that we haven't explored just yet, and that is in the configuration, also under Manage, in the configuration section. I'm going to click there, and there is a section under System that is called Basic Site Settings. In here, you can specify the site name, you can specify a slogan, you can specify an email address, and among other things, you can specify what is going to be used as the front page. By default, you see a /node. That is the default front page configuration. We're not going to dive too deep just yet, but be aware that this is what is called a view, and the view is configured to show content that is promoted to the homepage. And we're going to recreate some of this manually later. But again, for the sake of this example, I can change the front page to be something different, like /notice95, which is the internal identifier of that page, or I can say /welcome, which is the URL aliases. Both options are possible. Basically, any valid URL inside Drupal, you can specify here as a configuration for the front page. And if I click Save Configuration here, now I go back to the site, and if I click the logo, if I click the title, if I click the homepage link, now I am seeing the welcome node, which is what I wanted. Now I have yet another problem. I have the same piece of content available under the homepage, under the home link, and under the welcome link. So this is redundant. We're going to remove this one. So I'm going to click Edit here, and I'm going to uncheck the option to provide a menu link. I'm going to click Save. And with that, we got what we wanted. By clicking on the home link, I see the welcome URL, the welcome node. But by doing so, we also lost some functionality. What happens with all the articles? So this is going to be another exercise of how to find a piece of content if we have navigated away of that page. So for this, we're going to go to Manage and then Content. And so far, when we came to this page before, we just clicked the Add Content link and we were prompted to create an article or a basic page. This time, we're going to take a moment to see what is available here. You can see that every piece of content that exists on the website, being notes, are available here. And you can see, for example, the title of the node, the content type, the author, the publication status, when it was last updated, and you can take some operations, for example, edit, or if you click this, this is like a pill with an arrow pointing down. If you click there, you can see other operations that can be taken. For example, delete. If I wanted to delete something, I can do it here. So far, this is an example. We haven't entered a lot of content, but you can drill down this list by content type, for example. So I can say I only want to see articles, and that's gets updated. Maybe I want to see articles that includes the word DrupalCon in the URL, in the title. So I filter that and I go to one specific node that matches both criteria. Has DrupalCon in the title and is of the article content type. Let's say that I want to reset this. Let's say that I have 1,000 articles on my website, but just 3 or 4 basic pages. One way to find them easily is just by filtering by content type basic page. And out of that, all that exists on the website, I'm just going to find this specific element. So this is a way to navigate the content that already exists, one way in which you can drill down into specific pieces of content. With that being said, let's take a moment to talk about content types. So content types are a mechanism in Drupal in which you can put pieces of information that represent these different concepts or different ideas. For example, an article is supposed to be something that can potentially have an image, that can potentially uh, have taxonomy associated with them, that by default are going to be promoted to the homepage in a Drupal installation, and all of that. A basic page is meant to be for static pages, like one-off pages. They do not get promoted to the homepage. They do not have tags. They do not have the image field. But that is still kind of abstract. The real goal of content types is to be an abstraction for nodes, for pieces of content that represent the same concept of the same idea. So for example, let's talk about different possibilities. Let's say that we have a conference website. We can have a content type for a session like this one. So the session is going to have a title, the session is going to have a presenter, the session is going to have a description, the time that is going to happen, the date, the length, and so on. So in Drupal, we can create a content type called session to represent that unit of content. We can have another, let's say that we are a realtor and we are selling properties. We can say a content type for a house. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? What is the area of the house, how many parking lots. So we can have a content type in Drupal to represent that idea of a house. Let's say that we are selling cars. We can create a content type to store information about the year, the make, the model, the color, number of windows, number of doors, and so on. So the idea of content types is to serve as a container for pieces of content that share similar characteristics or describe the same ideas. A book, a session, an event, an article, like in this case, a basic page, and so on. So those are content types in Drupal, different ways to categorize a piece of content. Going back to what we described at the beginning, this example is about creating an organizational website. So we want to store information about the staff. So what we will be doing in a moment is creating a new content type altogether to see what the processes look like. Before doing so, I want to uh, take a little tour into something that's a little bit different and has to do with the appearance of the website. As I alluded at the beginning, as of this presentation, when you install Drupal, this is what you get out of the box, the bluish appearance called Bartik, and in the backend, you see that white appearance, it is called 7. Those in Drupal, if you want to change the appearance of how Drupal looks in the front end or in the back end, what you do is you change the theme. And we're going to do that right now. So I'm going to go to the Appearance tab, always under Manage. And you can see that this is called Bartik. If I scroll down, I can see 7. This is the backend theme, or what is called administration theme. And the front end theme is called default theme. So I'm going to, under Manage Appearance, I'm going to scroll down, and Drupal core comes out of the box with more options. For example, Olivero, which is going to become the default front-end theme. I'm going to click Install and Set as Default. It says that as of now, this is experimental. Do you really want to do this? I'm going to say yes, continue. I am still in the backend. That's why I am not seeing anything different just yet. We're going to go back to the front end of the site to see how this changes the appearance of the website. But before doing so, we're going to change the backend theme as well. We're going to select Claro. This time I'm not going to say set as default. I'm just going to click on install. And I'm going to continue. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and where it says administration theme, I'm going to change from 7 to Claro. I'm going to save configuration, and we're going to start seeing something different because we just changed the backend of the site. For example, if I go to content, you can see that the add content button is no longer like appealed, it is like a rectangle, and you can see other visual changes already happening here. So just by selecting a different theme for the backend, I have a different perspective. And if I go to the home page, now you're going to see that this is completely different from what we saw before. There is still some blue going on the website, but the overall look and feel of the site is very, very different. And for example, if I were to visit one of the nodes that we saw before, like node /1, you know, also like the way in which the information is presented looks different. Before we had the images next to the text, now is the image above the text. The taxonomy now have like a gray box in which they are presented, and so on. Again, I am just showing this at the moment because this is what's coming very soon into Drupal core. This is what you will be seeing out of the box, and we're just going to keep using these new themes throughout the rest of the workshop. Again, I want to open it up for questions if there are any. In the chat, feel free to ask. Okay, it looks like there are no questions. I'm going to continue. Before doing so, a couple of reminders. One, many of the concepts that I am talking about here, very lightly to be honest, nodes, content types, we're just going to start learning about fields. In a moment, we're going to talk about views and blocks and menu items and other Drupal concepts. Taxonomy terms, we have briefly talked about that too. All of those concepts are explained in more detail in this presentation. You can go to this URL and watch 45 to an hour video recording in which I go over these concepts in more and more detail with more examples. But again, I wanted to make the workshop as practical as possible. So that's why we just jumped into actually doing stuff instead of explaining and doing, because that would take more time. And there is not that much time today, unfortunately. But nevertheless, we're going to continue. So we said that we wanted to create a new content type. Why? Why do we want to create a new content type? For one, we can, the goal is to create or to store information on the website about the staff in my organization, the name, maybe a picture, the phone number, the email address, and so on. Why do I need a new content type for that? Can I use an article, for example? Can I use a basic page, for example? Yes, it is possible. You can store, the information of someone in an article. You can store the information of someone in a basic page. But as we're going to see when we start working with views, if you create a new content type, there are going to be a couple of benefits. One is making it easy to create listing pages for those pieces of content, like to create a page where I see all the stuff in my organization. If you create a new content type, that is going to be easier. And another thing that has kind of gone unnoticed or that I have given a lot of attention to is the fact that the content type itself serves as a template to collect information. So you might remember that the article gives you the option to enter tags and an image at the bottom, while the basic page does not. So again, the content type is what defines what pieces of content are going to be requested from the user. So with that in mind, let's see how we can create a new custom content type. That happens in the manage section of the website. Under the structure, I can click on content types, and it is no coincidence that we see article and basic page here, because this is what Drupal comes out of the box when you install the standard installation profile. Okay, I'm going to add a new content type altogether. So I'm going to click the blue um, box there, and the name of the content type is going to be stuff. You might remember from adding articles and from adding basic pages that you have a title and that title is required. Every node is required to have a title. There are ways to bypass that, but for the most part, try to avoid that. It kind of makes sense for nodes to have a title. What doesn't make sense all the time is that the label of that form element says the word title. In this case, we're talking about stuff. So these are people. Maybe instead of calling, title, I call this name. Why? Because title might be confused by the title that they hold inside of the organization. So name is more descriptive. Name is, Mauricio Dinarte, Michel Metz, Benjamin Melanson, and so on. It is more descriptive to rename the label from title to name. Um, and while configuring the content type, let's see a couple of options that we have. If I click on publishing options, you can see that by default, these nodes are going to become published. I can uncheck this, and by default, the nodes will not be published. And someone with the right permissions might be able to create those nodes, but they might not be able to change the status. This is one way in which you can enforce like a review process, like allow people to create nodes, but leave them unpublished, and only the administrator or someone with higher privileges can go back and change the status from not published to published. But let's not do that. Let's keep it published. Um, do we want items to go to the homepage? No, I don't want every staff member to appear in my homepage. And in fact, this will make not much difference now because we have changed the default front page, and the homepage now is a static uh, page, a static node. So for the context of how we have configured the site now, this is not relevant, but I just wanted to point this out. Why? Because this is the difference between articles and content types out of the box. Articles have this option selected. Basic pages do not have it selected. And that is why if you don't do anything special, um, articles appear in the homepage and basic pages did not. But when we modify the configuration for the homepage, this setting is basically no longer useful. Remember that I said that out of the box, Drupal has, revisions, aka keeping track of changes enabled. This is where that happens. If you don't want Drupal to keep track of changes, just unselect this. If you want Drupal to keep track of changes, which is basically for free, you leave that enabled. For those that were paying very, very close attention, you might remember that when you create an article, you have what is called a byline or a tagline that says submitted by admin on and the date, for example. Um, when you create a basic pages, you didn't see that. So again, this is another setting that is established on a content type level. So if I unselect this, I do not allow that tagline to appear. I just remove it. And in the case of staff, it kind of makes sense now to present it because ultimately how useful it is for the visitor to my website to know who created the node describing, a person in the staff of my organization. That's not that useful at all. So I'm just going to leave that unchecked. And in the menu settings, remember how I was able to add elements, to the main navigation, for example. This is where you configure that. If I unselect this, what I say is that um, I do not want notes of this type stuff to be added to the menu. And there are two things to point out about what I just described. For one, I can have 100 people under my organization, and it would not make sense at all to have 100 staff items in the main navigation of the site. That will just make the site unusable, or at least the navigation unusable. So for one, it kind of makes sense in this context not to allow for that. Something else that I want to point out is that everything that I am setting up here are defaults, but someone with the proper permission, for example, an administrator, can override those defaults. So even though I am saying that I do not want to add an element to the main navigation, when I am creating a node, if the user has high enough privileges on the website, they can override those defaults. So again, this is the template. Remember, the content type is my template, but some of those configurations can be overridden if the user creating the node, in this case, the user creating the staff, has enough privileges on the site. So keep that in mind. Some of these things are possible to override. So with that being said, I'm going to click Save and Manage Fields. And let's see what we got. Doesn't look like much. If I go to structure, content types, I can see that I have article, basic page, and staff. Okay, interesting. I'm going to click on content because that is where I actually create the nodes, and I'm going to create add content. By going through the process that I just went through, now I see my option to create a new staff node, and this is very, very similar to the basic page, with probably the biggest difference being the title label being renamed just to say name. So again, to save some time, I'm going to copy paste some information that I already have prepared. Michelle Metz is a colleague of mine, and I'm going to um, copy something in the body. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. One, body doesn't make a lot of sense. And to be honest, the word body didn't make sense either for articles of basic pages, maybe. But it was there. It was kind of intuitive, or maybe because I was giving that instruction to put the content there. But maybe this body represents the biography, or a description or something else. But the word body by itself is not very useful. So we're going in the same way that we change from title to name, we're going to change from body to description just in a moment. Uh, and this, you can, this placeholder text, let's imagine that this is a description. Another thing that I want to point out is so far, we don't have, the tags, we don't have the images. Let's just save for now. So I'm going to click save here. And I just created a new node. And this new node is just the title and the description. Now, it is possible, for example, to come back here and enter the email address like mickey@agatic.com and enter the phone number. Let's say 888-123-45678. Let's say that that's a valid number. But in Drupal, there is a better way to enter data. Um, the recommendation is that if you want to store information about a staff, about an event, about a car, about a property, you use what is called in Drupal as fields. You create a new field for each piece of content that you want, for each piece of data that you want to store. So in this case, we will be creating a field to store the email address, and we will be creating a field to store the telephone number. And for this, again, we're going to first do it and then come back and explain the benefits of doing so. So first we actually see it, and then the benefits of doing so will become more apparent. So I'm just going to not say click save. I'm just going to navigate away of this page so that the email and the phone number do not appear there. Okay, so where do I add content types, or where do I change the label of the body? All of that happens in the configuration of the content type. Remember that the content type is the template. So all of that happens in that template. I'm going to go to structure and then content types. And under the staff, I'm going to click manage fields. And we're going to come back to this later, but notice this arrow that gives you more options. But for now, I'm just going to click manage fields. The first thing to do is change the label. So where it says body, I'm going to click edit here, and I'm going to change this to biography. I'm going to click save now. And if I were to go back, I'm not going to do it for the sake of time, but if I were to go back, you will see that instead of saying body, it would say biography. Now, I'm going to add a new field. A new field is a way in which you can store discrete pieces of information in Drupal associated to a content type. So I'm going to add a new field, and you get to choose either add a completely brand new one or select an existing one. Uh, in this case, we're going to add a new one. And there are multiple types of fields. You can see in the general section, in the number section, reference, text, and there are even more than options that what we see in this screen. And this is going to become apparent in a moment. But for now, let's just jump straight into the example. I want to store an email, and conveniently enough, there is an email field. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to say email as my label, and I'm going to save and continue. Now, when you create fields, they have many configurations that you can associate with them. For one, you can say how many values do you want to allow entering. In this case, it says limited to one. And I'm going to leave it like that because I just want people to add one email for each staff member. But if I wanted, for example, I can say I want two, I want three, or four, five, or I want unlimited. And then people can enter as many emails as they want for the same staff member. For the sake of this example, we're going to keep things simple. We're going to keep this limited to one. If I click save here, I am going to be prompted with more options. One of them is required field. Do I want to make this required? And yes, let's say that I do not want to allow anyone to create a staff member without specifying their email address. Um, with that, I'm going to click Save Settings. And if I were to go to Content now, and if I were to edit Michelle, Mickey, I can see that, the body has been changed to biography, the label, and now I have an option to enter an email. And something interesting, if I click save here, I am not able to save the note anymore. Why? Because email was marked as a required field. The red asterisk there represents a required field. You can see that name has an asterisk, biography does not. But because name is email is required, now I need to enter an email. Otherwise, Drupal will not let me save the node. It is respecting the validation that I set it up for this field, that an email is required. Now I can save and I can click on the title and I can see how this looks like. Now, I'm going to come back again to fields and how they behave and how you can change some of the presentation in a moment. But before doing so, let's try to add a new field to store the telephone number. So I'm going to go to Structure, under Manage, and then Content Types, Staff, and Manage Fields. I'm going to click Add Field again. And remember, this time we want to store a phone number. When working with Drupal, it is important to create new fields for each piece of data that you want to store, but also it is important to select the proper field type, because the proper field type is going to give you validation options, is going to give you form entering options, presentation options, and a lot of things are tied to the specific field type. So let's try to do a mental exercise. From the list that we see here, what would be the best option to store a phone number? Do I want to store it as a piece of text, for example, and people just, in the same way that they can enter something in the title, they can enter something in a text plain field? Or do I want to store this as a number Is it an integer maybe because phone numbers do not have decimal parts, or it is something like completely different? This is kind of a tricky question, but one to allow me to explain some other functionality as part of Drupal. For one, I would say that neither a text plain or a number is suitable. In the case of a number, it is not suitable because you don't want to make mathematical operations on phone numbers. You don't want, for example, to get the average of the phone numbers or the media or and so on. So if you don't want to make operations like multiply by 2, divide by 3, and so on, there is not really a point in storing phone numbers as a number field. And a text plain, while possible, there is a better option. What is that better option? Storing uh, that information using a telephone field. And Drupal comes with a telephone field. But why does that doesn't appear in my list? The reason for this is because Drupal, remember, we are focusing on the CMS part of things, on the content management system, but Drupal is also a framework. A framework is meant to be extensible. A framework is meant to be adaptable. And something that Drupal cannot pretend to do is be everything for everyone. So by default, only some of the features come enabled. Others you need to enable yourself if you want to use them. So um, the fields that are available are provided by the modules that are available on the website. Modules are pieces of code that extends the functionality of the website using the Drupal framework, the Drupal API. So Drupal core comes with a module for telephones, and you can verify that and enable that module by going to the extend tab. Under manage, you go to extend, and in here you can see that Drupal core comes with a lot of modules, and the ones that have a check mark, that means that those are enabled. And the ones that come without a check mark, that means that those are disabled. Again, Drupal uh, comes with a lot of functionality out of the box, and some of that was not considered to be useful as a general use case, so they come disabled out of the box. So I can start scrolling down through the whole list, looking for something that says telephone, or I can use this filter here. If TEL, oh, it says field types, telephone, it is disabled. I can select it, I click install, and I am just enabling a feature that comes with Drupal, just that comes disabled out of the box. And if I look for TEL again, I can see that the field type is now enabled. And by doing so, I can go to structure again, content types, staff, and manage fields. And in here, I can now say add field, and then under the number section, I have telephone number. And this is the right field type to store a telephone number. Again, it was like a long route to say there is functionality that comes with Drupal, but that comes disabled out of the box. And if you want to make use of it, you need to enable the proper modules. Similarly, there are functionality that is provided by what is called contributed modules that do not come with Drupal core. You need to go to drupal.org to download them and install them. But for the sake of this example, we're going to use a feature that comes with Drupal core. And I'm just going to say, the label is going to be phone number. I'm going to limit it to 1 again. And this time I am not going to make it required, but let's say that, some of the staff, and they have phone number assigned by the organizations and some do not. And for those that do not have a phone number assigned, we want to provide a default, like the default number that if you call that number, you're going to call the organization. So in this case, I'm going to say 808 123 123 00. That is going to be my default number. I'm going to save the settings. I'm going to save the settings. Now I'm going to go to the content. And if I look at documents, by default, there is no phone number. And if I click edit here, notice that the default value is not present. Why? Because this was created before I added the field. I can still add one manually. You can notice that this is not required because it doesn't have the rest asterisk. But just for the sake of the example, let's follow along. Let's say that I'm going to add a new number, 10101010. I'm going to click save. Now, before going any further, I want to take a moment to explain why it is useful to create new fields when you want to add new pieces of content to the website. One, we already saw. For example, um, we were able to specify validation criteria like marking the email as required. If we didn't have this as a discrete field and we were just entering that information as part of the biography or the body of the node, then there is no way for us to enforce someone to enter an email because it would be really hard to have to parse this piece of text looking for an email in the right position, in the right format, and so on. So that's one thing. You can enforce requirements rules, for example, on a field by field basis. Another thing is that Drupal out of the box, when you select the proper field type, it is going to give you validation criteria. For example, if I try to save the email without an @ sign, that is not a real email, that is not a valid email. So you get some validation in place. So that's another reason. So you are able to enforce requirement rules, you are able to enforce validation rules. Something that is not noticeable because I am using a desktop browser, but if you were accessing this page from your mobile phone, under the hood, Drupal is using HTML5 to create these form elements. And for the case of the email, this is configured as an email input field. So when you click on the input field to enter the email, your keyboard layout on the phone is going to change to include an @ sign and a dot because those are common characters that appear in an email address. If you click on the phone number, this is under the Hura telephone field, your keyboard layout is going to change from the alphanumerical keyboard to just a numerical pad. So again, this is something that Drupal under the hood is leveraging web standards. And if you have a device that is able to understand those web standards and change the input of the elements, then it is going to do it like a mobile phone number. So that's another benefit what you want to use fields. Another one is that I said before that fields allow you to define um, presentation, how things are going to be presented. At the moment, this is just a piece of text. This is just a piece of text. If I go to a structure, and I'm going to open a new tab just to make switching between elements a little bit faster. I'm going to go into content types here. I'm going to, instead of clicking on manage fields, I'm going to click on manage display in the arrow. So in here, I can choose how those elements are going to be presented. Let's say that for the email, the label that says email, instead of showing it above, I want to show it in line, like in the same line. In the case of the phone number, instead of showing it above, I also want to show it inline. In the case of the email, instead of showing it as a plain text, if I select email here, this is going to become a link. And in the case of the phone number, it is not apparent in this theme, but that is also a link. And I can click here. I'm not going to make any changes. I just want to point out the fact that some of these elements, if they have a gear icon, you can click on them to show more configuration options. But for now, this is what I want. The biography with the label hidden, the email with the label inline, the phone number with the label inline, and the formatters being default, email, and telephone link, respectively. With all of that, I'm going to click save. I'm going to go back. I'm going to refresh the page. Now, the changes that I described, they start appearing. For example, the labels are in line, and now this appears as links. Again, this is just using web standards. This is a regular A tag with a custom mail to protocol in the href. That's a little bit technical, but the whole point is that these are now clickable links. If I were to click here, it will open my default email client, be it Thunderbird, Outlook, Apple Mail, whatever you were using, and start composing an email with that address as my to address out of the box. This now is a phone number. If I had an extension in my browser that is able to make phone calls, for example, using Twilio, using Skype, if I were to click here, it is going to start a phone call. Again, this is going to depend on the device that you are using. If you are visiting this page from a phone, uh, you literally click on that phone link and the phone is going to prompt you, do you want to make a call to this phone number? And if you say yes, it's going to make a call for you. If you click on the email address, it will open your email client in your phone number, in your phone. So again, this is using web standards, and this is something that you get when you use fields. Now, another thing that you can do when you have these separate fields is that you can reorder them. For example, I can say that I want to show the email above the biography. And let's say that for the sake of this example, I do not want to show the phone number. Like it is used internally, but I do not want to show it. So I just drag it down to the disabled section. I click save. And if I refresh this page, the email is going to appear above uh, the description, but the phone number is just not going to be present. If I click edit now, it is going to be there, like the information is going to be there. It is simply not being displayed to the user. And displaying information selectively is very flexible in Drupal. You can hide individual fields, you can hide the whole content tab, you can hide whole sections, you can hide um, you know many things, like the whole website if you want, and define different rules for all of that. um, but for the sake of the example, I just want to point out two more things in regard to content types. If I click on edit here, you can see that in the same way that I rearrange how the items are presented in the front end when you are viewing the node, I can also rearrange how the elements are presented in the backend when you are collecting the data. Again, this is the template, the content type serving as a template. So if I go to manage display, um, I'm going to click the other tab that says manage form display. And in here, again, just for the sake of the example, what I'm going to do is move the email address above and the biography and the phone number above. And I'm going to save. And now, if I click refresh here, you can see that the information is still there. The difference is that the form order has been updated to what I described in the manage form display. And the managed form display is way more flexible than just reordering. You can actually change how elements are presented. We're not going to dive too deep into this for the sake of time, but be aware that in addition to just being able to manage the fields, you can also manage the form display to modify how the data is collected and manage the display to change how the data is presented to the end user. So having a content type with only one user, excuse me, with only one node doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm going to quickly add two more nodes of this content type stuff. Again, these are two colleagues of mine, Benjamin Melanson. As you can see, now the phone number appears as my default. And for the sake of this example, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to add some biography here. And I'm going to click save. I added a new node and one more item. Again, another colleague of mine. Going to add content, Staff, Chris Thompson, sorry, oh, come on. And let's say that this is, I'm not going to use a default, I'm going to use a custom number, 22332233. And again, some random text as my biography, and I'm going to click save. The whole reason why I'm doing this is because I want to go over one of the probably most powerful elements in Drupal, and that is views. And views are used to create listing of content, and to have a list, it is ideal to have more than one element to show. So we're going to create a view that is going to show all the staff members in my organization. With that being said, let's create a view. How do you create a view? You go to structure, and all the way down, you click on views. Now, before creating the view for staff, I am going to create a different view for the articles. Remember that at the beginning, we have all the articles appearing on the homepage, but we lost that functionality when we changed um, the configuration for the homepage. So we want to recover that. So I'm showing this because it's an easier, faster introduction to views. So in this case, I'm going to say the view name is going to be article. What do I want to show? I want to show content. In Drupal, the word content is a synonym of the word notes. So remember, I was creating notes at the beginning. That's how we started the workshop. So yes, I want content. If you want to see what other options are available, you can create listing of users, of taxonomy, terms of files, comments, and many more options. But in this case, content is a synonym of notes, and that's what I want. What type of notes do I want to list? In this case, articles, because at the moment I'm just trying to recreate what was already there. Do you want to filter based on a specific tag, like the tag Drupal? Maybe, maybe not. In this case, I don't want to do that. I want to show all the articles. How do you want to sort them? By newest first, by older first, by title, or no sort at all? In this case, newest first, because it kind of makes sense that the newest articles appears first on the list. And then I'm going to say I want to create a page. The title of the page is going to be article with S at the end, articles. The path is going to be my domain / articles. What do I want to show? I want to show an unformatted list, just a list of what? Of teasers. Teasers is like a preview of the node. Remember that we saw the difference between seeing the content in the homepage versus seeing the content individually. That's the difference between a teaser and what is called the full post. But in this case, I'm just going to leave the default. How many elements do I want to display? 10, that's okay. Do I want to use a pager? That means like if there are more than 10 elements, I will get a pager. In this case, I'm going to reduce this number to 2 just to be able to see the pager happening, because I only have 4 elements. If I were to put 10 there, the pager will not display, and I want to show it to you. And I'm going to create a menu link. Important, the menu needs to be main navigation, and the title of the link itself is going to be articles. So let's take a moment. What did I do here? The view name is articles. Show content of type article sorted by newest first. I wanted to create a page with the title of the page being article, with the path being articles or lowercase. Display an unformatted list of teasers. I want to show 2 elements at a time and use a pager to continue navigating if there are more than 2 elements. I want to create a menu link under the main navigation menu, and the title of that menu is going to be articles. I'm going to click save and edit, and when you click save and edit, you get a new interface that is more scary than the one before. I'm just going to click save here, and for the sake of this example, we're going to come back to a similar page in a moment. I'm just going to back away slowly. I go to the home page, and now I can see articles in here. So if I click there, I can see all the articles. The presentation looks different because we are now using a different theme, but it's the same idea. They are presented in a reverse chronological order, and this is my pager. This is like a preview of the image. This is the title, the description, and the tags. I can click on one of them, and I can see more details about the node. So what I just did is I recreated some functionality that I had lost when I changed the configuration of the homepage. This time, I put it on the under a menu tab called Articles. Now we're going to create another view that is going to be a little bit more complex, just a little, yet still very powerful. I'm going to go to Structure, scroll all the way down to Views, and add a new one. In this case, the view name is going to be Staff. I also want to show content of type Staff. Uh, in this case, I don't want to sort them by newest. I want to sort them by title. Now, this title, unfortunately, it is not picking up that in the staff content type, I had renamed the label from title to name, but uh, you know that's how it is. Uh, Ultimately, this is actually going to be sorting by the name of the staff. I'm going to create a page. Page title is okay to be a staff. The path is okay to be a staff. This we're going to change in a moment, but for now, let's leave it like that. Items to display, let's leave it like that. Create a menu item, yes. Again, under the main navigation. And for the most part, we're going to leave it as is. So revisiting the configuration, the view name is staff, show content of type staff, sorted by title, which is the name. Create a page with the title of a staff, a pass of a staff, unformatted list of teasers, 10 elements at a time, use a pager, create a menu link under the main navigation with the item itself, the link item itself saying stuff. I'm going to click Save and Edit. I'm going to just save the page for now. And I'm going to open a new tab to the home page, and now I can see stuff here. And I see my list. And that's cool. So another reason why we want to create different content types. When you have different content types, you can create lists of pages that are specific to that content type. So in here we have a list of articles. In here we have a list of staff members. If I were to put everything under articles, if I were to put everything under basic pages, it would become harder to manage, to make those differences. That being said, um, let's say that I don't want to show this information like this, like one list, one on top of the other. What I would like to do is present this as a table. So how do I do that? One of the benefits of views is that views is two things. Is one way to query your website, the database of your website, to fetch information, but it's also a way to change how that information is going to be presented. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to show you directly where you need to make these changes. So in the format area, where it says unformatted list, you click there. And instead of selecting that, you select table. You click apply. You click apply again. And you click save. And just by doing that, if I refresh the page, now I have a table. The table doesn't look pretty yet, but this is a table. And it was literally a handful of clicks, no more than that. Now, what we're going to do is, because we have the fields in as separate items, we can add them as columns in my table. So I'm going to click add here. And the list that you are prompted when you click add is very, very long. So one tip is to use the name of the content type. So in this case, staff, and the list is going to be narrowed down only to elements that are relevant in that content type. So again, this is another inconsistency. The body field, remember that we have changed to biography, and it says here content biography, but
in the views interface, it still appears as body. So I'm going to select that, knowing that this is actually the biography. Going to click save. I'm going to go back to that interface in a moment, so don't worry, I just click OK there. And there is no need to be going to the other tab and refreshing, because the views interface under the hood here, you get a preview. So you see what it's going to look like. I added a description, but it says body. So this is where that's what I wanted to do it like that quickly, because I want to show you that you can go back to an existing field, click on the label, and modify the uh, what is going to be presented. In this case, the label is going to be biography. If I click apply and I scroll down, now it says biography. For the sake of completeness, I want to add a column name of name here. So I'm going to scroll up, going to click on title and say create a label, name, and click apply. And if I scroll down, now I have name and I have biography. For the sake of this example, let's say that I want to add the email and the phone. So those are other fields. I'm going to click on the fields section, add stuff, and then there is no need to go by one. You can select multiple in one go, and then Drupal will give you a specific configuration options for each of them. In the case of the email, I'm going to use the formatter as email to make it a link. In the case of the phone number, the formatter defaults to phone telephone link, which is the link itself. I'm going to click apply, and if I scroll down, I get all of that information. The last change that I want to do here is that I want the biography to be the last column. So basically, I want to reorder them. How do I reorder them? I scroll up, click on the arrow icon next to add in the field section, click on rearrange, and in here I can remove if I want multiple ones, or I can just move things around by dragging and dropping. I click apply, and I can see the preview. That's fine. Now I can save. Always remember to save your changes. Now, if I go back to the page that I had opened before, if I refresh this, now I have uh, my table as it was configured. And this is what is called views. This is one of the most powerful things that Drupal has in its repertoire. And unfortunately, there is not a lot of time to cover this in detail, in depth, but we could have literally a full week workshop just talking about views. We could have books, workshops, trainings, like any amount of time that you can imagine, and it will not be possible to cover everything that views gives you the option to do. So let's take this as a very light introduction to the concept. We are closing the end of the workshop, so there are a few more things that I want to cover quickly. One is menus. So let's talk about menus. And in the context of talking about menus, let's give it an example. Let's say that I want to create a contact page. I can assure you that in this installation, when you install Drupal with the standard installation profile out of the box, you get a contact form. But that contact form might not be easy to find if you don't know about it. So let's try to think in like Drupal thinks. So contact form, that sounds like functionality. Functionality on the website is provided by modules. So let's have a look. Maybe there is a module that's called contact that I can enable. If I click extend, which is where I enable the modules, and I look for contact, I can see that there is in fact a module called contact, and it is already enabled. So, okay, what is that? I can click on this icon, and I can click on configure. And it takes me to some page that I'm going to show you in a moment. But what does this website feedback is? I can come here, and this is a contact form. So Drupal comes with a contact form out of the box. The only thing is that it comes kind of hidden, if you will. It doesn't come added to the menu out of the box. So let's fix that. I'm going to copy the URL because I'm going to use this later. But the first thing that I want to show you is that how do I go to that page that I was before? You can go to structure, and instead of clicking content types, you click contact forms. And this is the page where I was in a moment ago, website feedback. Now, let's say that instead of saying website feedback, I want this to say something else. So I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to change the label to say contact us. And there are other things that you can change, like the recipients, a message, a redirect path, an auto reply. All of that we're not going to change for now. I'm just going to click save here. And by doing so, I change the label, and then when I go to that page, it says now contact us. So that's great. We did something there. Now I want to add this to the menu, like here to articles, home, and stuff. I want another one that says contact. So for that, I'm going to go to structure, and there is this menus section. I'm going to click there. That navigation is the main navigation. So I'm going to click edit menu in here, and I can add a link. And that link is going to say contact. The link is the path in Drupal that I want to link to. It is enabled, part of the main navigation, and I click save. I'm going to go back here and edit the menu to verify that it was added. Yes, it was added. The last thing that I want to show here is that in this UI, you are modifying menus. You can reorder them. So let's say I want home first, article second, staff third, and contact last. So I'm going to click save here. And if I go back to the homepage, you can see that now I have a contact link that says contact us, and the other elements have been arranged in the order that I specified before. The last thing that I want to show in the workshop is the concept of blocks. And what I want to do is I want to show something here that says you can send us an email, or you can fill out the contact form below. So in between this label and the form itself, I want to show some text. So for that, we're going to use what is called a block. A block is just another concept. All of them are explained in the video reference that I talked about before. So this is configured in the block layout. Before uh, creating the block itself, I want to take a short detour to show this link, demonstrate block regions. Every theme has what is called block regions, and these are boxes in which you can place content. So a primary menu, sidebar, content above, social bar, hero full, with, and there is another one that you cannot read the name there. But these are the different places in which the theme allows you to put blocks, to put content on the website. And each theme is going to be different. In this case, I'm going to exit out of the blog demonstration. And what I'm going to do is I am going to look for the uh, content section, and I have a blog that is called main page content. In this section, I'm going to click on place block. This is the region, and I'm going to click place block. And I'm going to say add custom blocks. And in here, it is going to say contact us details, for example. And I'm going to say you can reach out to us at ask@agaric.com. That's a real email if you want to reach out to us, or by filling out the form below. Now, this is the title of the blog. This is the content of the blog. I'm going to click save. After clicking save, I have a couple of options. One option is, do I want to display the title? In this case, no. Why? Because that page already has a title. So having this extra title there will not make a lot of sense. Another thing is that blogs allow you to have visibility rules. For example, I only want to show these notes on notes, this blog when I am showing an article or a basic page or a staff note. In this case, I don't want that. I want to only appear in the page that is the contact form page. The URL for the contact form page is /contact/feedback. And I can either make this an affirmative rule or a negative rule by selecting hide for the listed pages. Like you can negate the condition. But in this case, I only want to show this blog under this URL. No restriction based on content types, no restriction based on roles, only based on the pages, on the path. And in which region do I want to select to add it? To the content region. Remember that there are many. I want it in the content region. I'm going to save the block, and uh, it might be necessary to reorder this. In this case, it was in the right order already. Contact us details will appear above the main content of the page. And when working with blogs, it is important to go to the very bottom of the page and click the Save Blogs button. By doing so, now I can go back to the home page, and you can see that that information doesn't appear in the home page, doesn't appear in the articles page, in the staff page. But if I go to contact, it appears there. You can reach out to us at us@agaric.com or by filling out the form below. This is a blog. So a blog is some extra piece of information that you want to display along the main content of the page. In this case, the main content of the page is the form itself, and we are displaying a blog without a title. Why? Because the page itself already had a title. And this is a relatively simple example, but you can have blocks on the sidebar, you can have blocks on the footer. For example, this is a block that was configured to appear in the footer. You can define visibility rules not only by path but also by um, roles, by content types. If you have custom modules, for example, you can say visibility rules based on the day of the week or the time of the day and so on. So with that, we have approached the end of the workshop. I am going to open it up for questions in a moment, but before doing so, thank you very much for joining us today. On behalf of Agaric, it is a privilege and a pleasure to share our knowledge with you. We do, full version of these trainings on a regular basis. So feel free to check our website for details on when that happens. And we not only train on basics of Drupal, but also like theming, development, migrations, upgrades, React.js, and Python, and other topics. So feel free to reach out. With that being said, going to quickly switch back to the presentation. Remember that a recording of this workshop is going to become available in the YouTube Drupal channel for the conference, and another video recording uh, explaining some of these concepts in more detail you can find in this URL. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom of the presentation to share that there are contribution opportunities happening throughout the week. There are mentoring contributions, first time contribution workshops, general contributions, events. Those are the times. Drupal is open source. Drupal is a big community. We are able to do what we do today because of the efforts of multiple people working together. And we invite you to be part of that effort by participating in the contribution opportunities. I would like to get your feedback. There is going to be a feedback form in each of the sessions of the conference in which you can provide, information on how we did. And one more comment. Thank you very much. Those are the links to the slide deck, to the feedback form. That is my Twitter handle. My Drupal.org profile is also Dinarcon, and that is my email address. With that, I would like to say once again, thank you very much. And if there are questions in the chat, feel free to ask. Otherwise, thank you very much for being with us today. There is a question about, do you consider that issue where a rename field showed up as its original name a bug? I'm glad that you showed that because I would definitely snag me. Uh, I would say it is not a bug, but it is something that could definitely be improved. And because Drupal is open source, you can take part in those changes. Um, and actually, in the views interface, about a month or so ago, there was a change. Not, it was something different in which a label was changed from content to content view mode. Maybe the example itself doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment in the context of the answer, but what I want to explain is that someone found a label in the interface not being intuitive. They reported a feature request against Drupal core, and the community thought, oh yes, we never thought about this. This looks like a sensible improvement, changing the label to be something more meaningful. And in the process of probably a month after filing the issue, that was fixed, that was improved. And Drupal is over 20 years old, and a relatively small usability fix was solved in less than a month, just because someone identified the confusion and filed an issue against Drupal core to make the improvement. So is it a bug? I would say no. Is it something that can be improved? Yes. So you can file a feature request to improve that, and the community, can collectively work towards making that more sensible, more useful. And being a DrupalCon, this is a good opportunity to file feature requests, to file bugs, and to file someone who can help you move that initiative forward. So to be concise, I don't consider it myself a bug, but something that can greatly improve the usability of Drupal. And those things, sometimes we developers are very laser focused on the technical part of things and kind of forget the usability part of things. Drupal is doing better and better every time, but it is, a community effort, fixing those things that have gone unnoticed for so long already.